confidence is going to be in short supply in a society like this. How do we then solve for that? By reaching out from those of us who've had the fortune of having that confidence built through whatever resources and means, to then pull more people up to help them on the journey of firstly getting the confidence to even say, hey, I'm willing to put my hand up, because that on its own is scary.
Absolutely. Today on Catalyst Conversations with Mel Mosime, I have someone near and dear to me that I know and have been following your career for the longest time, over 2 decades now. I'm not going to read your bio. I'll let this conversation be as organic as possible, but I dub you and give you a lot of hats, but mostly in marketing, strategic marketing leadership. Someone who has moved from corporate and now has started on the entrepreneurship journey. Themba Nobanda, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Catalyst Conversations.
Thanks for having me, Mel.
Excited. There's so much to cover.
Yeah, indeed. How do you start when you've been friends for so long?
Right? Exactly. Now this is going to be a personal conversation, but we'll reel each other back in because there's lots to cover. So let's talk about exactly that. Your transition from being a marketing lead in the corporate space to where you are now with running 2 or 3 companies, Bizania and Brenspear. Take us back to where it all started. Hey, Catalyst family. If you're here, it means you're all about growth, inspiration, and game-changing conversations. And trust me, you're in the right place. Our show, and I call it ours because it's yours and mine, is not just a podcast. It's a movement. We bring you raw, unfiltered, and inspirational stories from innovators, entrepreneurs, and game changers who are shaping the future, and you get to be a part of the conversation. So, if you're ready to elevate your mindset, be part of a thriving community, and build real connections, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss an episode. And while you're here, please do drop a comment below. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and let us know what topics you'd like to see and hear next. And let's grow together. Remember, every conversation is a catalyst for something bigger. Welcome to the movement, and welcome to the Catalyst Conversations.
Look, where does it all start? I think I tend to explain this in where I am now, so that you get the context. What I do now, by the way, is, yes, I almost live a portfolio lifestyle. I'm a consultant on one hand. So I support businesses with business growth. So from the strategies to the implementation of how to grow businesses. On the other hand, I support entrepreneurial endeavors. So providing support to entrepreneurs on how to actually develop their businesses, access market, and so on and so on. On another hand, my truest passion is, over the years, since 2013, built a platform that is meant to help business people on the African continent network and grow and solve Africa's challenges. So where did it all begin? I am a generalist at heart, I think, is the way I think about it. People often ask me, you're a marketeer? Well, kind of.
Yeah.
A marketeer, and a lot of people don't know this. I just studied accounting.
Right.
So I started out in the finance world.
And that's what surprises a lot of people after engaging with you.
Yeah. And yet, I'd like to think there is a genuine passion inside me for ideation and creativity. And that's kind of why I talk about myself as a generalist. Right brain stuff. I did the maths and sciences in school, went and didn't finish the accounting degree. But after I left UCT, decided to pursue a career in marketing and did sort of a journey through the blue chips over about 15 years, and then went into consulting. Having worked in sales and in marketing and carrying a finance degree, I kind of blend all of those to basically drive business growth, is how I explain it now. So it's a journey really of, in one sense, self-discovery, as life went on, how did I end up studying accounting? People often ask.
Yeah.
I just asked which ones are the ones making money when I go to
Bottom line. And you advised accounting.
Yeah, only to find that like, no, it's not really like what I would want to do for the rest of my life, because only then was I getting career guidance, through the university itself. But prior to that, it was just like a case of you are just supposed to go to school and pass, and what people care about is maths.
Right.
So yeah, partly it's a journey of self-discovery and trying to arrive at doing the things that you love over time. And balancing that with, what pays the bills is kind of the journey of how I got to here.
What's interesting to me is someone with your experience and who is very passionate about what they do. You'd imagine that it's something you've always known all your life, that I am going to be in marketing and these are reasons and that's a path I'm going to follow. Talk us through now changing your mind. Obviously, bottom line, accounting, that's what makes money. We all want to make money, right?
Yeah.
And then linking it, saying, maybe not. Marketing is more your passion.
Yeah.
What did you get exposed to say, let me go this route? It's good and well that I have an accounting degree, which will hold me in good state in the future. But this is a career path that I want to take.
Good question. Now, some people are fortunate. They have exposure when they're quite young, which is why I genuinely advocate for that. I wish more and more people would invest in taking the time to spend time with young people in their early stages to just help them discover. Because knowing who you are, never mind professionally, just like getting to know yourself is a journey on its own. In communities like ours that we grew up in, where there isn't a lot of exposure to the kind of career guidance that would help you to make maybe a slightly more informed decision, at least by the time you choose what you study, say at university, if you're fortunate enough to do that, is a missing opportunity for a lot of people. Did I always know? You would think I would have always known, but no, I didn't. All I knew was at the time, what matters is I need to go to school, because education was the key to success. And I needed to pass so that I can get into university. That's the next stage. Then when I get into university, I need to go for the interviews, and then I get a job, and then I just work. Whether or not I wanted to have a corporate career, that was just determined by, that's what people do to have money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think coming from circumstances where you are one of the first few who have gone through the experience of getting a college education and all of that sort of stuff puts you in a position where you don't really have that much bandwidth for choice about that sort of stuff. The choice to actually part ways with the journey towards being a CA and go and pursue a career in marketing, that was tough.
Yeah.
And it was tough because it was mostly just scary. But isn't that where the money is? What am I going to do? Like, I don't know. Do people in marketing actually make money, or what is, I discovered marketing by accident. I went to take on an additional course during my university, and I just enjoyed it.
Right.
And I thought, hey, this is a lot more fun than what I'm currently doing in my VAC work. And, one of the big four accounting firms paid for my university. So I had to kind of
see it through.
Tell them that, like, look, I'm going to jump off from the article's journey. And that was tough. Is it something that most of us can find inside ourselves? To answer your question, I don't know. I think that actually it is, from my experience, especially for people who don't have the chance to get the career guidance early, you just have to live with the fact that it is a journey of discovery as you go. I'd argue that maybe even for people who do have the fortune of having career guidance, if you're a teenager, and I hear lots of stories similar to this, by the way, even from people who grew up with lots of exposure and privilege, I think you're likely to be very influenced by what your parents say, by what your teachers say, and so on. Not so much able to listen to the inner voice about what are your passions. Sometimes you actually don't even know some of your talents at that stage, You haven't fully discovered or explored them, or even had the chance to. So what would I say? It's a journey. You just try and explore everything as much as you can, and don't limit yourself. I think that would be my 2 cents to a younger version of me. And do it more fearlessly, because I think maybe for the need for security and the fear of jumping, I might have spent more time in corporate than maybe I would have liked to, because I really think over time what I've discovered is I really enjoy business in general,
Right.
but the entrepreneurship side of business, and even inside corporate, some of my legacy is about entrepreneur-minded thinking.
And you encourage entrepreneurship within an organization, which I've picked up with your teams. And
Yeah, this is what I do even now in consulting, is I try to bring entrepreneurial mindset into the way that that people do business in corporates. And why that's important now more so than ever before. I think all corporates will tell you in their strategies, things are changing rapidly. The pace of change has increased. The amount of volatility and uncertainty is so high that it's hard to predict. People used to talk in terms of 5-10 year strategies. I worked in a corporation, we had a 10-year strategy. In that same 10 years, so much can change in 2 years.
That's true. And
that renders that strategy almost not viable, right? I look at the pace at which things change due to technology. And that's what some of the tech world has brought, is increased pace. You can build, you can scale, you can change, you can innovate so fast that in reality, even for giant corporations, and the truth is, in my view, the ones who aren't able to do the pivot, change, innovate rapidly, are arguably struggling to find results, and so my thing is, I think entrepreneurship was just a natural evolution to where the world was going. I believe that my mindset is geared a lot more to that, and always kind of was. I just didn't know when I was finding myself sometimes knocking against the edges of corporate structure in a way, and sometimes feeling bruised, sometimes bruising others inside that environment, not realizing that what I'm pushing for is actually just something that is a natural evolution that corporations need to go for. And so now when I look back, I play it back, I'm like, okay, that's what it was. But would I have known that back then?
And not at the time. Exactly. You were going through your own transition and learning as you go. And it was a trial and error experience.
Exactly.
I mean, in your corporate journey, I mean, you are decorated in as far as the achievements and awards. And speaking from not even knowing what you wanted to do, and you're like, okay, what makes the most money? Let me do that, as opposed to let me go with what I feel could be a life's passion that I am happy to do for the rest of my life. What were the mentors that impacted your journey, that exposed you to a world of marketing and its intricacies, and the importance of mentorship, and perhaps getting people who are seasoned within the industry for you to say, oh my, I could do that, or I can take a page or 5 from somebody's book?
Yeah. Mentorship is, I think, often well discussed but underutilized tool in society. And perhaps the reflection that I often have is that more people need to try and seek out mentees than putting the burden on a mentee to find a mentor. Because I think it's the more confident, it's the more exposed due to fortune or proximity or whatever, who tend to then get mentors. So what do I mean by that? I think if you're in a blue chip corporation, generally speaking, there is some kind of mentorship program that's kind of designed to make sure that, young people grow in that organization. So inevitably you get mentors. And the result of that is people who are in blue chip corporations, they grow fast, right? So interestingly, when I talk to young people often, I always say try and get that as a track, especially if you come from a disadvantaged background, because I think it just helps to give you some of the basic tools that you need to then ramp off, even if you wanted to ramp off out of corporate. I think, though, what we don't talk about enough is the fact that, like, you know, self-confidence is a hard thing to develop. You and I both in certain ways have spoken about this thing of like growing up and being a little bit of a shy-ish person and then finding your voice later on in life.
Right. That's what a lot of people are not aware of when they see your confidence in boardrooms or giving a keynote. The assumption is that, oh, wow, he's confident. It must have been something that's inherent, right?
Well spoken, just here.
Yeah.
I want to be like that. But
Yeah.
to be honest, one of the challenges, if you look at like the African continent as a whole, if you've got a society that has been suppressed and oppressed for a long time and lives in a space where most of the people in that society don't have a lot of means, and I'm using the word means in as broadly as you can get it to mean, excuse the pun. Confidence is going to be in short supply in a society like this. How do we then solve for that? By reaching out from those of us who've had the fortune of having that confidence built through whatever resources and means, to then pull more people up to help them on the journey of firstly getting the confidence to even say, hey, I'm willing to put my hand up, because that on its own is scary.
Absolutely.
Why do I tell this story? One of the most kind of like transformational things that I experienced is I was working in maybe my mid-20s, late 20s, let me say, and an ExCo member, a CFO, comes to my desk and says, hey, Themba, now this is the CFO of the company. I've maybe seen him once or twice when I'm in the room presenting, you know. I don't have a relationship with him. I don't know him. He doesn't, you know, like we don't know each other like that. And it just goes, hey, how about we have some lunch? Why? And then,
Yeah.
you know, because that's how, like, you know, the things that you're battling as a young person, even in the environment, like, I've got this job now in a big global corporate, right? And you're still struggling with your own sense of like, am I even comfortable in this space? I feel like an imposter because everybody else who's here has got things that I perceive to be tools that they got before they even got through to the stage that we got to the same level playing field. And, you know, this lunch series where, like, he didn't say, I want to be a mentor, you know.
He just said casually, let's have
He
lunch.
just said, let's have lunch.
Yeah.
And then he said, yeah, no, man, I just wanted to catch up with you and just kind of get to know what's going on in your world. Oh, okay. I didn't even know that that was somebody like making a deliberate effort to just go, I see talent here. Let me reach out. And, you know,
Yeah.
so transformational, you know, 5 or 6 sessions over a few months, chatting to a guy called Gregor, who's German by descent, but works in a, you know, a corporation in Johannesburg. Our worlds are so different. He's asking me questions and he's curious about me, what it does for my self-confidence, how it kind of transforms just even how I show up at work. Dramatic. But here's the thing. I would never have gone to Gregor's desk and say, Gregor, please, would you mentor me? As useful and as valuable as that would have been for me, even if I knew that it would have been valuable, I just wouldn't have had the guts. So that's my whole thing now, is how do we challenge more people who are in a position where they can help to just go out and actually look for mentees. I mean, it's probably the one thing that could transform what our entire society looks like in the long run.
And I love that advocacy for people in the C-suite to seek out potential and talent to say, hey, I can hold your hand through this journey, because they probably don't have the confidence and they're scared and mortified. They wouldn't even dare. I don't want to color outside the lines. That stick to my job. That's what I came for. This is what I, get paid.
And even if you're thinking stick to my job, not quite. You're thinking, I want to get there. I have the desire to grow. I want to learn. I want to become a boss.
But you're not going to go to the CEO's office and
but it's
say,
too scary to be like, okay, show me the path.
Yeah.
You've been there, you just don't have the self-confidence to be able to just approach that conversation with confidence. And if we are cognizant of that as a barrier, then we need to try and find more and more young people to just be like, okay, I'll take you, I can, and along the way, open the door for a lot more of that to be happening. I would argue too little mentorship is happening in general in Africa.
Now, we'll come to the African conversation, because that's one that's very interesting and needs a totally separate podcast. But I think going back to the corporate space, mentorship we covered, but even beyond mentorship, for someone that is navigating perhaps promotion or levels or graduation from one position to another, the systems and process in place, right? And I say this because I think about entrepreneurs that started through corporate and entrepreneurs who were street smart as opposed to book smart, those who didn't study to get to where they are, those who didn't even get an opportunity to go into a big corporate company and learn certain, secrets. Talk us through this particular entrepreneur who has the fortune of being exposed to how big companies do it, but then they go back to reality all, hyped up, and they find, wait a minute, I was taking care of a certain department.
Yeah.
Now I'm taking care of everything. I'm sweeping, I'm cleaning, I'm calling, I'm a receptionist.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And I have to build a team, hire, fire. The reality and the romance fizzles out.
Yeah.
How did that go for you? Talk us through your story.
I think you've just described it. The romance.
Yeah.
Corporate builds you up. It does do that. It builds your confidence. You get promoted. You get bigger responsibilities. You've got big budgets. You get exposure to countries, to things, that journey or transition from, I want to go do my own thing.
Yeah. I'm ready. Yeah.
Can be bruising. And I've been no exception. I don't, even now, it's so funny. Someone was asking me just this morning. Yeah, that's nice, man. You're doing your own thing. Sounds romantic, but in reality, it's a journey of ups and downs. And I remember one of my mentors said to me, look, running your own business, if you've got the stomach for it, and I still remember those words, if you've got the stomach for it, it can be quite rewarding. But he was very clever to say, if you've got the stomach for it. Because when your liver is quivering,
right.
I think there's an element to which there is no one and nothing that can explain how to develop the resilience to do that. Now, I do think, though, most of us as human beings have got quite a lot of resilience. And sometimes the only way to discover how resilient you are is to be put in a situation where you need the resilience. So is it going to be tough? Yeah. But sometimes, to be fair to people who stick it out in corporate, corporate itself is not like a game of just roses and comfort. Just because, yes, there's that SMS that comes at midnight on the 25th, it's just like, doing. It is a sense of security and so on. But even inside a corporate, just consider that job is not secure. I mean, restructures have become commonplace. Job losses in certain industries, for example, in mining, are into the thousands over the last years. So no one is safe. And imagine having that comfort or that cushion pulled from under your feet very quickly. People in corporate also have to develop high amounts of resilience in general. The internal politics, the complexities of navigating a career, the discrimination that occurs, inside organizations, by virtue of it being a space full of lots of human beings, it can also be a tough environment.
With diverse environment and backgrounds and cultures,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
So I don't know that like there's a thing to say, if you want to do this entrepreneurial journey, be sure that you have some resilience or whatever. I think resilience is something you need in general in life, whatever path you're pursuing, if it's a path that's got growth designed in it. If you're interested in growth, you're going to have to develop resilience. And by the way, I also would argue even the opposite. If you don't want to grow, boy, you're going to need some resilience, because not growing is going to put you through some really tough things as well, So either way, I think as a human being, and maybe that's the thought, especially for me with young children, is like, my wife says this often, develop resilience in this generation, because apparently there is a belief, and this might be just because I'm a Gen Y or whatever. No, what am I? Gen X.
Gen X.
Trying to make myself look young.
Right.
That the resilience is fading as we go from one generation to the next. Oh, millennials, they are flimsy. Now, Gen Zs, like it's an ongoing thing. But I wonder whether, and I'm a Gen Xer and I think I'm resilient, but I'm sure baby boomers are like,
you don't know the half.
You don't know war.
Yeah.
So arguably, all humans, in order for us to keep progressing as is destined by the way we're designed, we're going to need to have resilience. And those of us who make that a thing that we're comfortable with as part of the journey of growth are probably then going to experience it with a little bit more comfort than those who have to do it because they're just discovering situations are tough, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Now let's bring it back to the continent. And this is something you and I are very passionate about. I mean, through your corporate journey, you got to travel the continent a lot. And I believe you reached the half mark. Like you've traveled almost half.
Almost
the continent.
Where I am now is last year I added 2 more countries to places that I've physically worked in. So I'm talking about countries, not visits, but physically doing work in, has hit 22, especially accelerated since I started working in East Africa in 2013. So arguably the last sort of 12 years or so now. And then obviously accelerated when I got into consulting.
And what has that exposure added to? What value? What is it? I feel it's an absolute privilege, right? The continent is rich in more things than I care to count that could, edify you as a human being. What has that done for you personally?
What a story, man.
Yeah.
That's
why we need a totally different podcast.
It's the whole podcast. I was about to say, it's a different podcast. I'm telling you honestly, I don't even know how to find the words to explain why it is important for us as Africans to really, really, really start to get to know each other. Because take it from the very source at the top of our biggest challenge as Africans in the modern world today. The emancipation, the renaissance, the Africa we desire is being hampered by our own disjointedness. And I would argue that it's no longer a secret or unknown thing. But I don't think enough of us have developed enough of the desire to really just join up and hold hands. And the start point of that is going to be to acknowledge that the division that created 54 states in what was, yes, multiple kingdoms, but didn't need to be 54 states, is the source or the genesis of the problem. But we need to quickly move towards addressing that problem. And for me, one of the things that is fortunate is that I've had the privilege to be able to go and experience African people like myself in so many different contexts that it literally, the pace at which my understanding of life, the world, business, everything literally accelerated, began when this journey of exposure started. And I was fortunate enough to actually start this journey by living in Uganda for a few years.
Yes.
Yeah, and that on its own, you know, came out of a desire that I had indicated to a boss of mine. As is done in corporates when you're planning for your career journey and stuff like that. A lot of people often ask, can I go to the London office, Amsterdam,
Yeah.
New York, Paris,
Anywhere but the continent.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things that was different is I asked, at that stage. I mean, even I at some point had, I want to go and work in Geneva. Yeah,
It sounds fancy. Yeah, it sounds exotic and exciting. Yeah.
But I then visited a friend of mine who was actually doing an international assignment in Kenya, just on a holiday. And after that visit, I changed my desire. I was like, no, I definitely want to go somewhere in East Africa. So a boss of mine who then, called me up and said, hey, listen, there's a post in Uganda. Do you want to come? Literally opened the world to me as far as I'm concerned. And it's not just the travel, but it's also the reach out. Because the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter which African country you're in. There are Africans of all countries in all African countries. So I'm not advocating for everybody to have the fortune, knowing, of course, that it's not cheap and it's not easy because of these borders and these expensive flights. I don't know why we've got the most expensive flights in transcontinental in the world. But I think if you take South Africa, for example, guaranteed all 54 African countries are represented in Johannesburg alone. If you take the time just to expand your world by reaching out and making sure that you have a diverse network of people, I think your world expands dramatically by doing that. So yes, if you can, travel. But I think the actual thing that we need to do is to unite. And that unity can only come through us uniting in person, like actually starting to realize that we are one people and we can actually pursue one cause. So that's my whole thing. That's why probably the thing I'm most proud of about my achievements in my career is the number of countries that I've physically done work in, because that is the actual asset that I have.
And this is how Bizania came about, Pan-African Business Networking Company. Tell us about that transition. And I'll tell you why I'm interested in it, because I remember experiencing something you did as a hobby that you eventually turned into a business. And we'll get to that, golf for fun.
Yeah.
And one of the things I appreciated about it, besides learning the sport, is these excursions you had to neighboring countries. And, typically, obviously, neighboring countries, Lesotho, Botswana, we can drive to. But, I mean, you wanted to expand. And I think I missed a few, but the ones that I went to, I enjoyed thoroughly.
Yeah.
Bizania, why did you start it?
So let me explain what it is, because then you'll see why I started it. Bizania is basically a platform for fast tracking the pace at which African people network to create business opportunity on the continent. The why is quite obvious. I think if we can start to see very quickly, it's been made quite prominent in the news now, the fact that Africa has become the enemy of the United States.
Oh boy.
And all African countries, what are we doing? We're shaking in our boots because what are we going to do without America? Well, actually, that's a question we should have asked 50 years ago. I'm glad it's being asked now. But the answer actually is where the magic lies. Without any other country, never mind the United States, Africa possesses already everything that it needs to be the most prosperous, most delightful, and most beautiful continent in the world by far. But I don't think that's something that inherently most of the 1 billion of us believe, live by, and sense. Yet if you talk to an American,
Yeah.
greatest goddamn country in the world, right?
Patriots are proud, the biggest PR machine, right?
And, it's so interesting. When we started Golf for Fun, which was the genesis of this journey, a friend of mine and I, Mutz and I had this idea. We love playing golf, but we're not good at playing golf. That's was not the kind of we love playing golf in that sense. What we loved about playing golf was that we were able to catch up and have an uninterrupted 2-hour or 4-hour hangout where inevitably you have to shut everything out. But because of the nature of the sport, you are chilled. So you're not using a lot of energy and in a high-paced environment that you're out of breath or you can't quite pause and chat. And we took that insight about golf and we decided, how do we get more people to start to use the golf course to network? And our whole thing was take people who are not even golfers and get them into golf is the one thing. But even for those who don't want to learn to play the sport, the main thing about golf and the clubhouse is everybody says this and knows it. The deals are done on the golf course.
Yes.
Now, it's not always like right between hole 7 and 8.
Yeah.
It's actually mostly in the clubhouse, right? Which in golf they call the 19th hole. And so for those who don't play golf, our whole idea was let's get a social experience going at the golf clubhouse. Because the truth is, no matter where you go in the world, and by the way, I live by this. Every country I arrive in, especially if I'm new, I'd carry my clubs with me, show up at the golf course. I will make connections, build my network with some of the most connected and high-powered people in that city, guaranteed. Just need to play 2-3 rounds of golf in the mornings before work, and you'll for sure. And by the virtue of using that as an ethos, our belief was we could get more and more people to network. Over time, we then evolved it to build what we would call the bigger platform, which is what Bizania essentially is. This is like an umbrella platform that basically is designed to help business people to network across these African borders.
That to me is fascinating because, to your point, not a lot of people have the confidence to just go anywhere and say, I'm going into a certain country for a certain purpose, but while I'm there, I could go to the golf course and make networks.
Yeah.
Was that the idea for Golf for Fun, to bridge the divide and also create a space where a business person can go anywhere on the continent and make those contacts?
And that's our whole belief is, how do we, if people have been divided for so long, there is naturally this otherness that we've created, and you could argue maybe it wasn't created up by us, but now the fact that it's perpetuated is mostly our responsibility. How do we just make it easy to facilitate? And by the way, when we host the experiences that we do, like some of the ones where we go to different countries, the whole idea was actually invite people from 10 or so different African countries, have them travel into a destination on the African continent to do two things. One, to show you how beautiful your continent is. The highest, most traveled destinations in the world by Africans are London, Paris, New York, in that order, followed by Dubai now in the last 15 years. And yet, every time we host one of these experiences, everybody who leaves, and that's how we grew this thing to about 3,500 people or not, database will attest to the fact that in even those so celebrated tourist destinations, you cannot compare. There is nothing you can compare in terms of the amount of natural beauty that Africa is endowed with.
I'm in 100% agreement.
So our tourism numbers should be a lot higher on the African continent, but somehow we just haven't gotten there. So that was the one thing, is go see your own neighborhood. The second was, let's bridge the gap to get just people talking across these borders and show how easy it is to actually just ignore the border and just go and see what's going on in Lusaka. Go see what's going on in Kampala. Go see what's going on in Accra. It's actually that simple. And what's great about it is, as a platform, it did create and foster a lot of that. And so we're hoping that it can continue to grow and become an enabler to the, what do they call it? Vision 2063, the Africa we want.
Right. Themba, I know you have a lot of businesses, you juggle a lot of businesses, but at the core, I think the message or the common theme is the love for the continent. And that's where I want us to examine the challenges of scaling businesses across the continent and the countries that you have traveled to, and how Brand Spear, which is another company that you run at the moment, navigates cultural and economic differences.
Yeah, so here's the reality. You put it quite aptly, the challenges of scaling businesses in Africa. Maybe you could argue that this is the most challenging continent to build and scale a business. And that's unfortunate, because we're the most endowed continent in the world. We've got lots of young people. We've got lots of mineral resource, land, everything. So working that to translate into wealth, in theory, if we've got all the ingredients right here, should be easy. What's actually, in my view, the actual challenge is largely linked to this kind of segregation of nations into small clusters versus one. European Union is a really good example of that. Everyone is prosperous. Broadly speaking, there are no problems in that society. But what is the European Union is just free movement. It's a common identity. Whether we like to criticize it or not, the fact that there is an identity around being a Caucasian, a white person, means that even the ones that are across the ocean in Atlanta who've got a different twang consider themselves friends. I saw the king delivered a letter to Donald Trump through the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom to say, you are welcome in the palace, And I just thought, I don't know, that's my own interpretation, but you're soon in office, there's very quick joined upness, that sense of we are one. If you take that away, then you've got each individual, when it comes down to it, struggling to deal with things that they could find next door from a fellow African, and slowing down the pace at which they can become competitive, scalable, effective in business. So for me, we can talk about all the others. We don't have infrastructure, we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have that. I think the day that we start to just work, some of the smartest web designers are sitting in Zambia.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's news to me. I was totally oblivious. I would have thought maybe in India.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you get the point.
Right.
Right.
Correct, yeah.
Some of the smartest web designers I've experienced. But what's stopping us now, to be honest? You don't physically have to go to Lusaka to find a really good web designer. But you might, even as an African, go as far as looking for people in India.
Because the assumption is that the labor is cheap and they're much more advanced and better and faster, cheaper,
And yet, the Zambian is cheaper. is closer connected to the target audience that you're trying to talk to. So they're quicker to turn around things because they get it.
Mm.
You don't have to do a lot of work to get them to fully understand your market, your environment, your target customers and consumers. But merely for the fact that we're not doing enough of conversing across each other, we're exacerbating the problem of overcoming some of these other structural challenges for whatever reason that we have in Africa. So that would be my thing, is let's just start talking.
And what's the role of marketers in closing that economic gap within the continent? Because we are aware that there's barriers to trade because of these nuances that we really have been singing about for decades.
Yeah.
How can marketers with the innovative and disruptive innovation try to aid in closing that gap within the continent?
Again, different podcast.
Yeah. It's a pain body because we are all aware, and it's abundantly clear, the richness of the continent. It's in its human capital, beauty, you said environmental.
Yeah.
But we're just missing something to make magic happen.
Yeah. What could marketers contribute to transforming Africa is a huge opportunity. What is our reality and what's a challenge that's stopping marketers from actually doing as much as they could? It's two-pronged. The first, I would say, most of our best marketing minds are engaged in huge global blue chip corporate businesses, growing those brands and not growing African, entrepreneurial, or local businesses and brands. And that on its own is a problem, because who pays the highest salary? Back to the story about who pays the most money. Who gives me the most comfort and security in a market where it's tough to be an entrepreneur? It's not Silicon Valley here, right? Entrepreneurship is normally like a default of because I couldn't get a job.
Precisely.
Right.
And this is the conversation I had with previous guests, that most, entrepreneurs they're forced it because I can't get a job. Okay, let me sell something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you think about it, the best developed, best talented, best skilled marketers are not really working on projects that are building African brands and businesses. The two-pronged nature of the challenge is this. In reality, though, if we were to utilize marketing as a tool as Africans to help us with our journey of renaissance, our journey of transformation, our journey of growth, our journey of pursuit of the goal of the beautiful, prosperous Africa that we deserve, the part of the challenge is understanding that all of us are marketeers in a way. Marketing as a science can be studied and honed to the point of like acute level of skill. But the other beautiful thing about marketing is that, like, by virtue of doing business, you inevitably are a marketeer. To illustrate my point, is Richard Branson an entrepreneur or is he a marketer? He's a marketer.
He's a marketer. He's darn good at it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Was Steve Jobs an entrepreneur or he is a marketer?
Marketer.
He's probably a marketer. But that's not what his profession says. He's a tech entrepreneur. Yeah, sure. But by virtue of being an entrepreneur or any person in business in any way or form, what you actually are doing, if you're not talking about the specialized skill itself as corporations sometimes define it, by virtue of having to grow any business, you are a marketeer. So what does that mean? Our governments understanding the power of marketing. Why a person doesn't realize that visiting an East African country or a West African country could be as rewarding as going to Paris is just that Paris is better marketed. And as such, there's a responsibility for every one of us, that's what I would say, to really start to rebrand what we actually believe is Africa. Because that's where it all begins. The United States is a big, powerful brand
And a big PR machine.
and a big PR machine. So when you think about it, every American who makes you feel like, hey, that's national pride.
Yeah.
Leo.
Patriotic. Just.
I might not even agree with what they believe about the rest of the world or whatever, but the thing you can't fault them on is when it comes to marketing their country. They've done an excellent job.
That's the biggest
And
business. Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes that marketing is what drives the competitiveness in sport, the success in business, the desire, the attraction of trade interest. When you don't have much besides a green paper called a dollar. Being kind of harsh to the Americans, maybe.
Yeah.
Right? But that's my belief. When do we start to talk about Africa with our chest out, with pride? When do we start to think about African jewels in all forms as something of more value than something to be plundered by the West? Because we're complaining about it, but we're not actually saying this is our stuff. We are proud to be here. We believe in being here. We are the best goddamn country, continent, if you will, in the world. That's where we've got to get to. And that's my whole point, is everybody needs to play a part as a marketeer, not marketeers, all of us.
Now, I mean, I'm looking at the list of questions I have here for you, but one that I really want to ask is around your entrepreneurial lessons from Bizania and Golfer Fund, because Bizania connected thousands of professionals across the continent, and Golfer Fund blended networking with fun and business ultimately. What lessons did these ventures teach you about business and community building?
I'm sitting on a book on that one.
Yeah.
Golfer Fund was actually my first business that I launched, and we never made money.
You did not make any money.
Never made any money. Never made any money. It took us until, I think, year 7 before we had our first profitable endeavor. The first year that we made, and now that's 7 years of pouring money into something and really believing in it and learning as you go, discovering the thing you were talking about. It's not the same as operating in corporate, because I'm used to lots of resource at my disposal. Now you have to be the head office, the execution, the everything. That on its own is a lesson. You need to be a generalist in order to be successful as an entrepreneur, because the beginning stages, you're never going to have the resource to just hire the hands that know what they're doing in those different areas. So that's one. There's lessons around it. Really, you must have the stomach for it. I'm always grateful to Alistair, because when times are tough, I remember that. I think there's also a thing about, getting people to bet on you is a big thing in business. It's how people attract funding. It's how people attract customers.
Your reputational currency. I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah. And I think perhaps people underestimate. Obviously, I preach a lot about this, sometimes even too preachy. Your network is your net worth story, because you're going to need that to thrive in any environment. And by the way, this is applicable even to someone in a corporate or different type of pursuit in government or whatever. I honestly would write a whole book about lessons around that, because my journey of discovery was such that I learned a lot of those lessons somewhat the hard way, because I left corporate with a lot of sense of confidence that, of course, I can figure this out. Being a smart guy is not enough.
No, it never is.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, no. Are there lots of lessons? Yes. Maybe the bigger point is, do we share enough of those lessons so that then the next person doesn't have to go up the same kind of challenges, trying to, slide their way out, grip their way up a slippery pole. Maybe we should do more of that amongst us, just generally as people, because maybe we could get faster growth of most businesses that are on the continent.
Now, Themba, one of the things I've observed and appreciate about how you run business is that you're very passionate about your human capital, developing them, and them outliving the brands that you bring them into. And it feels like, I don't know if you're aware, but I think you're a teacher, you're a sage at heart. What is it about, why is it so important to you to get the best talent and get them to get to the next as quick as possible? Obviously, they're part of your brand and you take pride and you want excellence.
Yeah.
Why are you so passionate about human capital in all your businesses?
Look, we've got a long journey to travel is my ingoing perspective on this. And it doesn't matter where you look, there's opportunity for people to grow. I am testament to the fact that, like, I, outside of like having the exposure, the coaching, the mentorship, the teaching in so many various fields, I would not be where I am. And I can see it's physically evident the journey of learning that has got me and how that learning then translates into me being able to tackle the next opportunity, to harness a certain skill for good. I am, yes, truly passionate about how do we help in the journey of building the Africa we want, every single African young person getting the skills they need to flourish in their own right, even if it's in the context of a job, because my view is everybody needs to go out there and do. And you are right. I do think of myself as a teacher.
Yeah.
I might have, for any other reason but the fact that it was not high on the list of what pays a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. Otherwise, it would be the sweetest profession, right?
Yeah, and I am trying now in ways to get into it because I genuinely enjoy it, apart from the fact that I think that it's important and meaningful and needed in our society. The thing I do think about this thing about growing people, though, is that if all of us had more skills, let's say double the skills that we have, and if you took 1 billion people and you just doubled the skill base, we would have doubled the GDP. Because literally there is a correlation between how skilled you are and how productive you are. And productive means what your output is, but also what is in your pocket. So would we have a prosperous Africa if everybody was deeply and genuinely invested in just grow the next person? I genuinely think so. So that's been one of the things, it's definitely one of my signatures, whether in my journey in corporate, whether outside of corporate as an entrepreneur. I try to work with people that I feel like, even if it's for a short term, because in entrepreneurship, generally, you're not able to attract like the top gurus of every industry. I'm happy to invest the time in the journey of building my business to also build others so that they can go and, some of the people I've worked with have gone off and done some really wonderful things, which I take personal pride in because that is, for me, fulfilling the dream. That's what we should all be doing. To the extent that inside Bizania, one of the platforms that we've actually built is called Talent Place Africa, which is literally about how do we just help with getting more people connected to opportunity on the continent, but in the journey of doing that, getting people exposure to opportunities to grow and learn, because that's what it comes down to. The value of Thembelani as a young person with just a high school qualification, it's very different to the one with a degree, very different to the one with exposure to working in a World Cup 2010 at Coca-Cola in a brand.
Yeah.
It's very different. And all of that is just what I've learned. So if we knew that, and we do, then everything is about just take that Thembelani and just invest in them, and the rest will follow.
All right. There's something I do that is rather controversial with some friends of mine to try, regardless of where they are in their life's journey, whether they're self-actualized or trying to get to the next, to say, if you were to write your obituary,
Yeah.
what would your legacy be? we don't know what the future holds, but what would your ideal obituary read as? That sort of, to me, is giving a masterclass, not only to yourself about what you still want to achieve,
Yeah.
but basically also about what your legacy is and how you want your footprint to look like to the world.
Yeah.
What is that for you? And it could
Here
be a
lies a
masterclass.
man who is dead.
In a tombstone. Yeah.
Um, so I have a thing about the pivotal point in my life. At age 28, I was diagnosed with a near fatal heart condition. The thing that came out of that is it shaped a sense of one urgency to live a full life. Yeah. Because I was fortunate enough to survive coming out of that. And still, assisted now by chronic medication, have a trajectory where I could live, well into like old age, as it were. I mean, I think I've already arrived there, but that's not the story. The story is this. If I were to say what is the legacy, therefore, shaped by that pivotal moment, one of the things that grew as a burning desire is to ask myself, what is the impact that I want to have in the world that I found? And I think for me, it's become firstly just knowing that and pursuing that and honing it as a thing that you do annually. I wish everyone could do that. And I hope I can inspire everyone around me to do the same. But if you were to read mine, it would say something like, here lies a man who committed himself to building a better Africa. Because I genuinely think that a better Africa is also a better world. And if we could get all of us to contribute to building, because we need to build right now, that's the way we are as a people. And not just us, but everyone. If we could start by just getting Africans, diasporans, and the ones living here, plus even those who might not yet see it. Donald listened very carefully. Might not yet see it. The benefit to the entire world of having a really prosperous, beautiful Africa is immense, because we are the source of humankind.
I think this is a perfect moment to have that theme song, My African Dream, playing in the background, because you just painted such a beautiful picture. Themba?
Send this clip to Donald.
I will send it to Donald. If I disappear the next week, you know who did it. But anyway, somebody's watching at home, and you could give them a very short masterclass, a call to action to say, this, if you remember nothing else, let this be your biggest takeaway.
Let this be your biggest takeaway. I don't know that there should be one, to be honest. I think my biggest takeaway is maybe just an opportunity to say thank you for having me to have this conversation. You are doing exactly what I believe we should all be doing. In fact, maybe some of the stuff that I'm preaching you are doing. And I respect and I admire you for doing that. I think because I know it takes courage and it's not easy. And it takes a lot of hard work. So firstly, thank you for the opportunity. I think more and more of our voices need to be out there, and more conversation and dialogue needs to happen. So well done. That would be for me the main thing is that we've achieved is we've started talking, and you're giving voice to conversations that need to be had.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, friend.
Thank you. And thank you for being a catalyst. Thank you for your contribution to the world.
Indeed. Absolute pleasure.